Divorce is a subject that has provided endless material for drama and comedy writers through the ages, from Euripides to Shakespeare to today's New York Times bestseller list. When Kenneth Hodges, a professor of English at the University of Oklahoma, discovered a medieval German manuscript laying out the rules for a divorce by combat, social media helped the sensational story quickly go viral. With the option of divorce by combat, divorce in medieval times could result in more than heartbreak. How common were these legally sanctioned marital duels, and how were they conducted? Divorce by combat appears to have been a form of trial by combat. Trial by combat was part of Germanic law that dealt with accusations between two parties where there were no witnesses or a confession. Whoever won the duel was deemed to be right. It was essentially a legally sanctioned duel. These rules for a divorce by combat come from Hans Talhoffer's Fechtbuch, which was written in 1467. The book serves as an instruction manual for how duels should be fought. The book deals with many different types of duels fought with various weapons. However, the section that caught Professor Hodges and the internet's eye was the section on duels between men and women. The man was placed in a waist-height 3-foot, 1-meter deep hole, with one hand tied behind his back while the woman was allowed to move freely. Both parties wore practical clothes, a one-piece bodysuit with stirrup legs. The woman was armed with 3 rocks, each wrapped in a length of cloth to form a kind of swinging club. The man was given 3 normal clubs. His clubs matched the length of the woman's clothes to ensure that their ranges were equal. The man was not allowed to leave his hole. To further limit him, if he touched the edge of his hole with either his hand or arm, he had to surrender one of his clubs. If the woman attacked him while he was surrendering his club, she, in turn, forfeited one of her rocks. The rules placed the man at a clear disadvantage, but it's important to remember that it is unlikely that the woman had had any kind of combat training. Furthermore, in any kind of physical contest, it is likely the male would have an advantage in size and strength. So the handicaps placed upon the man were to try and make the fight as fair as possible. The conditions for victory are unclear. Some historians believe it was unlikely that fights were to the death. Instead, it was probably down to the judges to decide when one of the fighters had been incapacitated. Since both parties were hitting each other with big, blunt objects, it seems likely that many trials ended with one party being knocked unconscious. Historians have also suggested from Talhoffer's drawings that there were alternative ways to win, such as if the woman managed to drag the man from his hole, or if he managed to drag the woman in. There is also the possibility that many of these duels eventually descended into wrestling matches, where the duels could be won by managing to pin the other party. However, there is some evidence that these duels may have usually ended in a death, even if it wasn't at the hand of the combatants. If the man lost, he would be taken from his hole and executed in the town square. If the woman lost, she would be placed in a hole and buried alive. Talhoffer's manual predominantly concerned itself with giving combatants fighting advice, rather than laying out the rules of a medieval divorce by combat. Other sources, including old Germanic law books, have been used to fill in the gaps. The internet has taken Professor Hodges' work and sensationalized it quite a bit. There are not many surviving sources that refer to divorce by combat. By the late medieval period, trial by combat itself was becoming increasingly uncommon, and divorces were next to impossible to get. In addition, medieval trial by combat was predominantly used for criminal judicial purposes, not civil. Trial by combat was usually reserved for criminal cases where there was insufficient evidence, but if found guilty, the ruling would be death.